He woke up because the house felt different. Not loud, not chaotic, just awake. For a moment he stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling. The clock on the wall showed 12:47. Too late for conversation. Too early for morning. He sat up slowly, careful with the movement the way he had learned to be over the years. His knees complained softly when his feet touched the floor. Nothing unusual. Just the quiet reminders of time. He slipped his robe over his shoulders and opened the bedroom door. The hallway was dim. Only a thin strip of light stretched across the carpet from the living room. Voices drifted through the house. Low voices. Adult voices. He assumed the television was on. His son sometimes stayed up late watching the news. But something about the rhythm felt different. There were pauses. Responses. Someone laughing quietly. A conversation. He stepped into the hallway. The wooden floor creaked lightly under his weight. He froze. Instinctively. Waiting to see if anyone heard. But the conversation continued. No one noticed. He started walking toward the kitchen for a glass of water. Slow steps. Measured. And that's when he heard it. His name. Not loudly. Just casually woven into the conversation. Dad probably wouldn't notice anyway. He stopped. Completely still. The water could wait. The voices continued. And without meaning to. Without planning to. He stayed right where he was. Listening. The living room light spilled across the hallway floor. Soft and warm. Familiar. He could see their shadows moving against the wall. His son. His daughter. And his daughter-in-law. 3 voices. Talking quietly. They sounded relaxed. Comfortable. The way people do when they believe the night has already ended. He told himself he should walk into the room. Say something simple. Ask if anyone wanted tea. Make his presence known. But another sentence drifted into the hallway. And it held him there. I just think we should start planning ahead. The tone wasn't harsh. Not angry. Practical. Responsible. Someone else answered. I know, but how do we even bring it up to him? A small pause followed. The kind that makes a room thoughtful. He felt a strange tightening in his chest. Not pain. Just attention. They were talking about him. That much was clear now. But not in the way families usually do. Not in stories. Not in memories. This was different. His son spoke again. He's doing okay now, but things change fast at that age. At that age. The words hung quietly in the air. He looked down at his hands. The hallway light showed the thin veins across his knuckles. Yes. At that age. He understood the meaning. But hearing it said like that, from the other side of a wall, was different. He leaned slightly against the hallway frame. Not to hide. Just to steady himself. And the conversation continued. I just don't want us to wait until something happens. His daughter's voice this time. Soft. Concerned. The kind of voice people use when they believe they are being kind. Someone else replied. The house is big, the stairs alone are risky. Risky. He glanced down the hallway toward the staircase. He had climbed those stairs for 32 years. Up and down. Morning and night. Carrying groceries. Fixing railings. Holding children when they were too tired to walk. Now the staircase had become a problem. Or maybe he had. Another voice added gently. There are good places now, really nice communities. Communities. He knew that word. He had seen the brochures. Bright buildings. Smiling older people playing cards. Quiet gardens. Places designed for people whose lives had slowly been simplified. He had never imagined himself there. Not yet. But the conversation moved forward as if the decision were already halfway made. We just need to make sure he's taken care of. Taken care of. He closed his eyes for a moment. Not because the words were cruel. They weren't. That was the strange part. Everything they said sounded responsible. Thoughtful. Even loving. And yet something about it made the hallway feel colder. Because no one had asked him. They were planning a future for him. While he stood only a few steps away. Listening. He stayed there longer than he meant to. The hallway clock ticked quietly behind him. Each second stretching the moment thinner. The conversation continued. Sometimes serious. Sometimes lighter. At one point his son laughed softly. We'll figure it out. Figure it out. The words were calm. Confident. The kind of confidence that comes when people believe the decision belongs to them. He looked toward the living room doorway. He could walk in right now. He could say, I'm already awake. And the room would fall silent. They would look surprised. Embarrassed. Maybe even guilty. But he didn't move. Instead he stepped back slowly. One quiet step. Then another. The hallway returned to darkness behind him. Their voices faded slightly as distance grew. By the time he reached his bedroom door, the conversation was just a murmur again. He sat on the edge of the bed. Hands resting on his knees. The room felt the same as it always had. Same furniture. Same quiet air. But something inside him had shifted. Not anger. Not even sadness. Just a realization settling gently into place. Tonight he had learned something important. When people believe you are no longer listening, they speak very differently. And now he wondered something he had never wondered before. When did my life become a discussion instead of a voice? The house didn't feel the same after that night. Not louder. Not quieter either. Just different. Small things began to change. At breakfast, his daughter didn't rush past him anymore. She paused, just for a moment. Good morning, Papa. 2 simple words. But the tone had changed. There was no irritation in it now. Only something softer, something careful. His son noticed it too. The old man no longer spoke as much during dinner. He didn't argue. Didn't correct anyone. He simply listened. Sometimes he smiled, faintly. Sometimes he just nodded. And strangely, the silence made everyone uncomfortable. Not because he was angry, but because he looked peaceful. That quiet dignity felt heavier than any argument he could have made. One evening, his grandson walked into the living room and saw him sitting alone, reading the same old book he had owned for decades. The boy hesitated, then slowly sat beside him. "Dadu, can I ask you something?" The old man closed the book gently. "Of course." The boy looked at him carefully, as if seeing him for the first time. "Why didn't you say anything that day?" The room felt very still. The old man looked toward the window, where the evening light had begun fading. For a few seconds, he didn't answer. Then finally he spoke. Very quietly. "Because sometimes silence teaches people what words cannot." And somewhere inside the house, someone overheard that sentence. And for the first time, they began to understand what they had actually done. That sentence stayed in the house longer than anyone expected. Not loud, not dramatic. Just quietly present, in the air. The daughter heard it first. She had been standing in the hallway, holding a glass of water she had forgotten to drink. Silence teaches people what words cannot. The words kept repeating in her mind. Suddenly, memories started surfacing. The time he waited outside her school for hours in the rain. The nights he stayed awake when she was sick. The sacrifices he never spoke about. And slowly, the glass in her hand began to tremble. In the living room, the grandson was still sitting beside him. "Dadu, were you hurt that day?" he asked softly. The old man smiled, not with sadness, but with a strange calm. "Hurt?" he repeated quietly. Then he shook his head. "When people speak carelessly, it usually says more about their pain than your worth," he said. The boy frowned slightly, trying to understand. But everyone laughed, he whispered. The old man looked at him, his eyes warm, steady. "Yes," he said gently. They laughed. He paused, looking toward the fading light outside the window. But sometimes, people laugh, because they are afraid to look at themselves. The boy stayed silent. And in another room, someone quietly sat down. Because the weight of those words had finally reached them. Not like anger. Not like blame. But like truth. And truth, when it arrives quietly, is often the hardest thing to face. The daughter sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. Her father's words kept echoing in her mind. Not angry, not accusing. Just calm. And somehow, that calm felt heavier than any argument. She remembered that evening years ago. The house was full of guests, relatives, laughter. Her father had tried to share an idea, something simple, something hopeful. But before he could finish, someone laughed. Then another joined. Soon the room was full of jokes. And she had laughed too. Not loudly. Not proudly. But enough. Enough for him to notice. Enough for him to quietly stop speaking. Back in the living room, the grandson was still sitting beside him. "Dadu," he said slowly. "Did you ever tell them it hurt?" The old man shook his head gently. "No," he replied. "Some lessons, people have to discover themselves." He leaned back in his chair, looking peaceful. But the boy noticed something. Not pain. Not bitterness. Just a deep understanding. The kind that only comes after years of watching people carefully. And for the first time, the boy realized something important. His grandfather wasn't quiet because he was weak. He was quiet because he had learned what most people never do. That not every truth needs to be shouted. Sometimes, silence is the loudest answer. And somewhere in the house, a door slowly opened. Because someone had finally gathered the courage to face him. The daughter stood at the doorway, watching him. For a moment, she couldn't move. The man sitting in that chair looked smaller now, older than she remembered. But his eyes were the same. Calm, steady, almost kind. Her son noticed her first. "Mom," he whispered. The old man slowly turned his head. Their eyes met. And suddenly, the room felt heavier. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. All the words she had rehearsed upstairs disappeared. He didn't ask anything. Didn't question her. Didn't even look surprised. He simply nodded once, gently. That simple gesture hurt more than anger ever could. She walked closer, step by step. Memories kept flashing in her mind. His voice teaching her to ride a bicycle. His hands fixing her broken school project. The nights he stayed awake when she was sick. And the evenings she laughed with everyone else. Right when he needed her to stand beside him. She stopped a few steps away. Her fingers tightened together. "Dad," she finally whispered. The word felt strange on her tongue. The old man looked at her quietly. Not waiting. Not demanding. Just listening. And sometimes, that kind of silence is the hardest thing to face. "Dad," she said again, this time a little louder. The old man looked at her, calmly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The grandson shifted in his seat, sensing the tension. "I didn't know you were here," she said. Her voice sounded careful, almost defensive. The old man nodded slowly. "I know," he replied. No accusation. No bitterness. Just two simple words. That made her eyes drop to the floor. The boy looked between them, confused. "You know each other?" he asked. The daughter inhaled slowly, then nodded. "He's my father," she said. The boy's eyes widened. "Your father," he repeated. Then he looked at the old man again, almost amazed. "You never told me," he said. The old man smiled gently. "You never asked," he replied. The boy chuckled softly. But the daughter didn't smile. Her chest felt tight. Because the room suddenly held two truths at once. The grandfather her son adored. And the father she once walked away from. She finally looked up again. "Why didn't you tell him who you are?" she asked. The old man leaned back slightly in his chair. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "it's easier to be someone kind than someone remembered." And those words, landed heavier than any accusation. The room fell quiet again. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that forces memories to speak. The daughter swallowed slowly. "You should have told him," she said. Her voice softer now. Almost uncertain. The old man shook his head. "He was happy," he replied. "That was enough for me." The boy looked between them again, still trying to understand the invisible weight in the room. "But, why didn't you come see Mom before?" he asked. The question hung there. Simple. Honest. Dangerous. The daughter closed her eyes for a second. Because the answer wasn't simple. Years ago, when she left home, she believed she was doing the right thing. Chasing a better life. A bigger city. A future that didn't feel small. But somewhere along the way, calls became fewer. Visits became excuses. And silence slowly became normal. Until one day, too much time had passed to know how to return. She finally looked at her father again. "You could have called," she whispered. The old man gave a small smile. "I did," he said. Her eyes widened. "Every birthday," he continued. "Every festival. I left messages. I sent letters too." The daughter felt the ground shift beneath her. "Letters?" she asked quietly. The boy leaned forward. Curious now. "What letters?" he asked. The old man looked at him gently. "The ones that came back unopened," he said softly. And suddenly, the daughter understood something terrifying. Maybe her father had never stopped reaching out. Maybe she had simply stopped looking. The words settled into the room like dust. Heavy. Unavoidable. The daughter felt her chest tighten. As if something old, and buried, had suddenly been dug up. "Returned," she whispered. Her voice barely there. The old man nodded slowly. "No address," he said. "Mailbox closed. I thought, maybe you had moved again." The daughter stared at the floor. Because she knew the truth. She had moved. Twice. Changed apartments. Changed jobs. Changed numbers. But never once thought about leaving a message behind. Never once thought that someone might still be trying to find her. The boy looked confused again. His small brows tightening. "So, you were looking for Mom?" he asked. The old man smiled gently. "Always," he replied. That single word. Always. Hit harder than anything else. The daughter covered her mouth. Her eyes suddenly burning. All those years she believed her father had let her go. Had accepted the silence. Had stopped caring. But now she saw something different. Something far more painful. He had never stopped. He had simply been waiting. Waiting quietly. Waiting patiently. Waiting without anger. The boy looked at his grandfather. Then at his mother. "Mom," he said softly. "Grandpa didn't forget you." The daughter finally looked up again. Tears now sliding down her face. "No," she whispered. He didn't. Then she stepped forward slowly, closer than she had stood in years. And for the first time since she walked into that room, she spoke not as a stranger, but as a daughter. "I'm sorry, Dad," she said quietly. And the old man's eyes softened, the way they do when something broken finally begins to mend. For a moment, no one moved. The room felt smaller now, filled with something fragile and new. The old man looked at his daughter carefully, as if he was afraid that if he blinked, she might disappear again. "You came back," he said quietly. Not as a question, but as something he was still trying to believe. The daughter nodded slowly, wiping her tears. "I should have come sooner," she admitted, her voice shaking a little. "I thought you didn't want to see me." The old man let out a soft breath, a tired, gentle sound. "Parents don't stop wanting their children," he said, "no matter how much time passes." The boy shifted closer to them both, still holding his grandfather's hand. "So nobody is mad anymore?" he asked, the innocence in his voice so simple, so honest. The daughter let out a small laugh through her tears. "I don't think we ever really were," she said softly. The old man nodded. "Sometimes people just get lost," he added, "even when they belong to each other." The boy thought about that for a second, then squeezed his grandfather's hand tighter. "Well, we found you now," he said proudly. The old man smiled. A real smile this time, the kind that slowly spreads across the whole face. "Yes," he whispered. "You did." Outside the window the afternoon light had shifted. Warmer, softer. The kind of light that makes old rooms feel less lonely. The daughter finally sat down beside her father. Not across the room anymore. Not standing near the door, but right beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. And for the first time in years, the silence between them didn't feel like distance anymore. It felt like peace. The room slowly settled into a quiet calm. Not the heavy silence from before, but something softer, something warmer. The boy swung his legs gently from the chair, still holding his grandfather's hand. "Grandpa," he said after a moment, "are you still lonely here?" The question hung in the air for a second. The old man thought about it carefully, not rushing the answer. "I was," he admitted quietly. "But today feels different." The boy smiled, satisfied with that answer. His mother looked around the small room, taking in the faded walls, the old clock, the window that faced the street. "So this is where you've been all this time," she said softly, almost to herself. The old man nodded. "It's not much," he replied, "but it's peaceful." She looked down at her hands for a moment, then back at him. "You could have called me," she said gently, a little regret in her voice. The old man smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried years inside it. "And say what?" he asked. "That I missed you? That I hoped you were happy? Some things feel easier to keep in the heart." The daughter shook her head slowly. Not anymore, she said. Her voice firmer now. The boy looked between them again. Curious as always. So what happens now? He asked. The question made both adults pause. Because sometimes the future is harder to answer than the past. The old man looked at his grandson, then at his daughter, and for the first time in a long while, the idea of tomorrow didn't feel so distant. The old man slowly leaned back in his chair, letting the moment breathe for a second. Outside the window, a few birds crossed the fading sky, and somewhere down the street, children were still playing. Life moving forward as it always does. His daughter finally spoke. Her voice softer now, almost careful. "Dad, come home with us," she said. The words were simple, but they carried years of distance. The old man didn't answer immediately. He just looked at her, studying her face, as if trying to find the little girl he once knew. "You have your own life now," he said gently. "A family, responsibilities." The boy quickly jumped in, almost as if he had been waiting. "We have space," he said excitedly. "And Mom makes really good food." The daughter laughed quietly, the tension in the room easing a little. "He's not wrong," she added, looking back at her father. "You don't have to stay here alone anymore." The old man glanced around the room again. At the old table, the worn chair, the quiet walls that had listened to his thoughts for years. This place had been his shelter. But suddenly, it didn't feel like the only place he belonged. He looked back at them, his eyes softer than before. "Are you sure?" he asked slowly. The boy nodded instantly. "Very sure." And in that moment, the old man realized something simple. Sometimes, home isn't a place you return to. It's the people who come back for you. Silence settled in the room again. But this time it felt different. Not heavy. Not distant. Just quiet. The old man slowly stood up, his movements careful, as if time itself had made his bones thoughtful. The boy watched him closely, curious about what he would say next. The daughter waited too, her fingers lightly gripping the edge of the table. The old man walked toward the small shelf near the wall. From it he picked up an old photograph. The frame was scratched, the colors slightly faded, but the memory inside it was still alive. He turned and showed it to them. It was a picture from many years ago. A younger version of him, standing beside a small girl with messy hair and a huge smile. The daughter looked at it, and immediately recognized the moment. "That was the park near our old house," she whispered, her voice carrying a quiet nostalgia. "You used to push me on the swing every evening." The old man nodded slowly, a faint smile touching his face. "You never wanted to leave," he said, "even after it got dark." The boy leaned closer to see the picture, trying to imagine his mother as that little girl. "Mom had messy hair?" he asked with surprise. The daughter laughed. A real laugh this time. "Yes," she admitted. "And your grandpa used to complain about it every day." The old man placed the photo back on the shelf. But the memory stayed in the room. And for the first time since they arrived, the distance between them didn't feel so big anymore. The boy kept thinking about the photograph. It was strange to imagine his mother as a little girl. To him she had always been the person who knew everything, who reminded him to finish homework, who worried when he stayed up too late. But that picture told a different story. A girl who ran through parks, who refused to leave the swing, who didn't care if her hair was messy. He looked at his mother again, trying to see that little girl inside her. The daughter noticed his expression. "What?" she asked softly. "You were a kid once," the boy said, still sounding surprised. The old man chuckled quietly. "Everyone is," he replied. "Even the people who seem like they've always been adults." The daughter leaned back slightly in her chair, her eyes drifting around the room. "So much has changed," she said. The old man nodded. "Yes," he agreed. "But some things don't." The boy tilted his head. "What things?" The old man thought for a moment before answering. "Memories," he said. "They stay with us. Sometimes quietly, sometimes loudly. But they never really disappear." The daughter lowered her gaze to the table, his words settling somewhere deep inside her. Because she knew he wasn't just talking about the photograph. He was talking about all the moments they had once shared. Moments that time had tried, but failed to erase. Evenings arrive quietly now. Not the kind that demand attention, the kind that simply sit beside him. He has started noticing small things again. The way light fades slowly across the wall, the distant sound of traffic, the soft rhythm of his own breathing. For a long time his nights were filled with noise. Scrolling. Thinking. Remembering things he wished he could forget. But lately, something feels different. Not happier. Just lighter. He no longer waits for messages that may never come. No longer revisits conversations in his head trying to find the exact moment things changed. Some stories don't end with answers. They just stop. And strangely, he's beginning to understand that silence isn't always loneliness. Sometimes it's space. Space to breathe, to think, to exist without performing for anyone. Tonight the room is dim, the window slightly open, the cool air slipping in like a quiet guest. He sits there for a while. No music. No phone. Just the quiet. And for the first time in a long while, the quiet doesn't feel empty. It feels honest. There was a time when he believed peace had to be earned. That one day, after fixing everything, after becoming better, stronger, more certain, life would finally feel calm. But life never really works like that. Peace doesn't arrive after the storm. Sometimes it appears quietly in the middle of it. In the pause between two thoughts. In the moment you stop explaining yourself. In the second you realize you don't need to chase every connection that drifts away. He used to think distance meant failure. Now he sees it differently. Some people come close enough to change you, but not close enough to stay. And maybe that's okay. Because every conversation, every late-night laugh, every unfinished goodbye, leaves something behind. A small shift in who you become. Tonight he isn't trying to understand everything. For once, he lets the unanswered questions exist. The night outside moves slowly. A bike passes somewhere far away. Someone laughs in another building. Life continues. And inside the quiet room, he simply sits there, noticing it all. Not rushing. Not searching. Just being. The strange thing about quiet nights is how honest they become. During the day, distractions do most of the work. Messages, calls, plans, noise. But at night, none of that protects you. Your mind slowly opens doors you didn't plan to visit. Memories walk in without knocking. A conversation that ended too soon. A moment when someone looked at you differently. A message you typed, and then deleted. He doesn't try to push those thoughts away tonight. For a long time he believed moving on meant forgetting. Now he understands something else. Forgetting isn't strength. Remembering, and still choosing to continue, that's the real strength. Some people were never meant to stay forever. They were moments. Beautiful, confusing, intense moments. Like rain that arrives suddenly, changes the smell of the air, and disappears before you fully understand it. But the ground remembers. And so does the heart. He leans back slightly, staring at the ceiling. There's no sadness in the room tonight. Only awareness. The quiet kind that doesn't demand answers. The kind that simply reminds you. You lived those moments. And they lived inside you. He closes his eyes for a moment, letting the silence settle around him. There was a time when nights like this felt heavy. When every quiet minute carried a question. What if things had been different? What if he had said something else? What if he had stayed a little longer? Those questions used to circle his mind like restless birds. Tonight, they don't. Not because he finally found all the answers. But because he realized something simple. Life doesn't always give explanations. Some stories just end where they end. And maybe they were never meant to continue beyond that point. He slowly sits up, the room still wrapped in its familiar calm. Outside, the night moves forward like it always does. Unbothered. Steady. Certain. It reminds him of something important. The world never pauses for unfinished feelings. It simply keeps moving. And somehow, so do we. Not in a dramatic way. Not with a sudden transformation. Just slowly. Day by day. Moment by moment. Until one day you notice something unexpected. The memory that once felt heavy now feels light. Not forgotten. Just placed gently where it belongs. In the past. A quiet chapter in a story that is still being written. The room is quiet again. Not the uncomfortable kind of silence. But the kind that feels honest. He slowly walks toward the window, pausing for a moment before pulling the curtain slightly aside. Outside, the street is calm. A few distant lights glow softly in the dark. Somewhere far away, a car passes, then everything becomes still again. Life is moving out there. Always moving. He used to think that certain moments defined everything. A single mistake. A single goodbye. a single person leaving. Back then, it felt like the entire story had ended right there. But time has a strange way of revealing something different. What feels like an ending in one moment often becomes just a quiet turning point later. He didn't notice it at first. Days passed. Then weeks. Life slowly filled the empty spaces he once thought would stay empty forever. New routines appeared. New conversations. New small moments that didn't feel important at the time, but slowly rebuilt something inside him. Not the same life he had before, but a life that was still moving forward. And maybe that's the quiet truth most people eventually discover. Life doesn't replace what we lose. It simply keeps giving us new chapters, even when we didn't expect the story to continue. He lets the curtain fall back into place and stands there for a moment. There was a time when nights like this felt unbearable. The quiet would stretch too far, and his thoughts would fill every corner of the room. Memories had a way of arriving without warning. A laugh he once heard across the table. A conversation that ended too quickly. A moment he wished he could replay just once more. Back then, those memories felt sharp, like unfinished sentences that refused to end. But time has softened them. Not erased them. Just softened them. Now when he thinks about those moments, they don't carry the same weight. They feel distant. Almost like pages from a book he read long ago. Important pages. Pages that shaped the story. But still only pages. He understands something now that he didn't understand before. Some people are not meant to stay for the entire journey. They arrive. They become part of your story. And then one day, their chapter quietly closes. Not because the story failed, but because stories are meant to move forward. And so does life. He takes a slow breath, the room calm around him. For the first time in a long while, the silence doesn't feel empty. It feels peaceful. Like the ending of something that was finally allowed to rest. Time moves quietly. Most days we don't even notice it. Until one day we stop, and realize how far we've come. There were moments in his life that once felt unbearable, moments that seemed like they would define everything that came after. Loss. Silence. The slow fading of people who once meant the world. At the time, it felt permanent. Like the story had reached its final page too soon. But life rarely ends the way we imagine. Instead, it continues, slowly, quietly, patiently. Days turn into weeks. Weeks into years. And somewhere along that long stretch of time, something unexpected happens. The pain softens. The questions stop echoing so loudly. And the memories that once felt heavy begin to settle gently into the past. Not forgotten, never erased. Just placed where they belong. He once believed that being laughed at meant the end of everything. That being misunderstood meant he had already lost. But now he understands something different. Sometimes the people who laugh first are simply the ones who cannot see the story yet. Because the truth is simple. Life isn't written in a single moment of doubt. It's written in every step that comes after. Every quiet decision to keep moving. Every day you choose not to give up. And one day, often when you least expect it, you look back and realize something strange. The moments that once broke you were also the moments that shaped you. Not into someone perfect, but into someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who kept going when it would have been easier to stop. And maybe that's the quiet truth behind every long journey. People may laugh at the beginning, but they rarely understand the ending. Because the ending belongs only to the one who kept walking.